Good evening. You're watching Plain Speak right here on CNN News 18. My name is Toya Singh. This is a story where we try to look at the day's top stories through the lens of just the facts. For our second story, we're looking at a persisting debate around the 5 bold promises that were made by the new Karnataka government to its 6.1 crore population. Today, the Prime Minister also referred to those promises in a speech. He said that the development in the state of Karnataka was halted because money had been diverted to giving these freebies. These were his words. Now, what were those 5 promises made by the Karnataka Congress before they came to power? 1, free electricity. 2, rice of a certain amount, 10 kgs. 3, bus travel for women across the state. 4, money to unemployed youths. And 5, money also to women heads of families across the state. Now, these promises are considered to be a key reason behind the Congress's mammoth victory in this state, as we said just a little more than 2 months ago. But their hefty 52,000 crore price tag is one that's long had the opposition up in arms, with the state finance secretary even flagging one promise, the Gruha Lakshmi scheme, back in June. Now we're going to take tonight a deeper look. We're going to look to understand whether there's any truth in this BJP allegation that we hear again and again, that these guarantees are hampering development in one of the country's wealthiest states. And why were they implemented if they'd already been flagged? Let's take a deeper look. But first, let's take a look at what the Finance Department had said. This was back in June. They'd said, A, that Karnataka is going through several fiscal constraints, a set of fiscal constraints. Number 2, they'd said that it was difficult, as we told you already, to implement the Gruha Lakshmi scheme. What is that? That's the scheme in which they've said that women heads of household will be given 2,000 rupees. Now, they've said that the scheme will create huge recurring liability. And indeed, if you look at those 5 promises, this is supposed to be the most expensive one of them to the state exchequer. Now, we also know that the scheme will significantly impact the budget provisions, and this is something that the Finance Department said. They said that the state would be pushed towards a huge revenue deficit. Now, very quickly, let's talk about the 5 plans and what the government's plan is when it comes to each of those 5 plans. Now, the guarantee in total, as we've said, is going to cost about 52,000 crores per year to Karnataka's government. This is something, in fact, that the opposition, the BJP leader Amit Malviya, also tweeted out in a tweet. He said it would cost slightly more, but that's a number that both sides have seemingly been in agreement with. Now, number 2, funds that are meant for SC/ST welfare have been diverted for these guarantees. This is something that we know on record. This, and according to our reporters, funds that were meant for Bangalore's infrastructure, those have been diverted for these guarantees. 11,000 crores in specific have been diverted. Now, this money, as we just told you, would be diverted from plans for the SC and ST communities. But what is the government's logic here? And when I say the government, I mean the Karnataka Congress. Their logic is that their schemes like the Gruha Lakshmi scheme, are schemes that are meant to benefit people of all castes and all communities. So if you are a member of the SC or ST groups, you will benefit from these plans. Let's take a deeper dive. This is essentially what we're looking at. We'll have economists, the BJP, the Congress, all join us for this discussion. The freebie conversation. Is Karnataka in a cash crisis, and are these guarantees that they've made actually hampering Vikas? That's what we're taking a deeper look at. Let's take a look at our guests.
Coming to the point of discipline on the matter of finances, who is talking about discipline on the finances? The BJP is the one who pushed the state of Karnataka for a borrowing loan of more than 2.6 lakh crores. And moreover, to be very, very frank, when they were in the election year and they know that they are going for election, why did they give approval for so many projects more than 2 lakh crores?
एक तरफ महाराष्ट्र में हम चौतरफा विकास होते देख रहे हैं, वहीं दूसरी तरफ पड़ोसी राज्य कर्नाटका में जो हो रहा है वो भी हमारे सामने है।
Okay, let's take a look at the guests we have for this conversation tonight. We have Dr. Lakshmi Ashwin. She's a spokesperson for the Karnataka BJP. Good evening, ma'am. We have Bhavya Narasimhamurthy, a spokesperson for the Karnataka Congress. Good morning, ma'am. And good evening, ma'am. And we also have the professor from the Institute for Social and Economic Change, ISEC in Bengaluru. He's also with us. This is Professor Chandan Gowda. Good evening, sir. All right. Before we go ahead, sirs, ma'am, I'd like to make it very clear. My hope with our discussion, I don't want our audiences to get lost in the numbers. It's easy sometimes in these conversations to throw numbers and lose out the point we're trying to make. Professor, I'm going to come to you with my first question. We know initially you had the finance secretary say essentially that the Gruha Lakshmi, which is one of the 5 promises, that in particular, but the other 4 promises too, all of them would cause an immense burden to the state exchequer. Essentially, what the BJP seemed to feel also was that the money doesn't exist. Now, DK Shivakumar has come out in a statement after. You've actually had a number of other Congress leaders come out since and clarify that, look, the money does exist if you shift it out of other places. Our reporters say that the money that was meant for the infrastructure has been shifted in Bangalore infrastructure in specific. Other reporters point out that money that was meant for SC, ST communities, schemes for them, that's been shifted. Sir, I just want to ask you, as someone with a keen economic eye, tell us, is that how it works? Is it indeed that simple? You shift money out from one place and you make money in the budget for other things? And do you see this as something that is financially viable? What's your perspective?
The budget and the allocation for the schemes was done in consultation with the finance department. I remember the chief minister having a series of meetings with them to work out how best to proceed. And the scheme you referred to, the 2,000 rupees a month as stipend for women-headed households, the finance department actually suggested 13 categories to apply before anyone becomes eligible, and that actually shrunk the pool of recipients. So it's not that the government is acting independently of the finance department. There is consultation on an active basis. And the bit about Bangalore infrastructure being very short-changed, I don't think is correct, because Bangalore has almost got 40,000 crores, out of which 30,000 is for the metro. No, 30,000 crores. So I don't think that claim is correct. But the fact is, the entire 5 schemes will not likely exceed more than 16% of the budget. I know you didn't want numbers, but there's no other way.
No, do go ahead with numbers. I just don't want us to lose audiences, but go ahead.
Yeah, so this 16%, it means 84% is left for other things. The rains happened, the relief was immediately announced. So I don't see it as something that is put the government's financial plans out of gear. Someone who mentioned at the beginning of the program that the previous government has incurred a huge, expense on lots of contracts. And that is something the government is also committed to working with. That's 2.5 lakh crore projects, actually. They're trying to see what the genuine costing is, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel that the government schemes, whatever the election, planning may have been, the schemes in themselves are being welcomed by the recipients. And I don't think it is throwing things out of gear. And I really feel we ought to hold off for at least a few months before trying to judge the effectivity of these schemes and what it means for the running of the day-to-day administration in other departments.
Okay. So I know the perspective you provided was a analytical one, not political, but I'm still going to go over to the BJP spokesperson who's with us, Dr. Lakshmi Ashwin, and ask her, ma'am, we've heard from sir right now. He's essentially saying, give them a chance to implement it. Let's see how it plays out. Then let's comment. Ma'am, why doesn't the BJP do that in the state?
First of all, I would like to say the fact that ever since the Congress government came to power, it has always been mired with the controversies. Now it is a term with respect to Gruha Lakshmi Yojana. The Congress government seems to have a myopic vision about the fiscal prudence of our economy, our state economy, which is the basic tenet of for any economy to thrive well, and which is the utmost requirement for any economy to be sustainable. Now, despite given the warnings given by the finance department for implementing Gruha Lakshmi Yojana, that is, huge amounts of funds are required, and that's not possible under this juncture and in this scenario. They don't have bothering about the fiscal prudence. They are in the hurry to take our economy to fiscal bankruptcy. Now, with the implementation of Gruha Jyoti Yojana, they've already increased the electrical tariff that has already started disincentivizing small and medium scale industries, which is the requirement for the manufacturing sector that will erase the manufacturing sector. That is already started erasing the manufacturing sector because electric tariff being the major raw material for any small and medium economy to be thrive well. With the improvement under our government, BJP government, with the advent of the new manufacturing policy and with the congenial atmosphere for the ease of doing business, with the congenial atmosphere for the FDI, foreign direct investment and foreign institutional investment, we have achieved maximum manufacturing activity, and that has improved the manufacturing base, that has helped us to improve the employment rate and to increase the economical activity. But with the Congress government, with the advent of the Congress government, we've already entered the vicious cycle that is decreasing the economical activity, increasing the inflation, decreasing the employment rate, decreasing the
sorry, I
economic
do need to
activity.
ask, what do you mean when you say that these promises will decrease economic activity? You've given one example, but I feel like that's such a broad stroke statement. Could you qualify it, please? Give us more in terms of context.
If we spend more amount of money, which is allocated in the budget for one scheme, what will they do for another schemes, for other welfareistic schemes? Doing the freebies politics. We believed in self-reliance. Just by giving 2,000 rupees for one household doesn't decrease the poverty rate.
All right.
In fact, they are pushing them to perpetual poverty.
Dr. Ashwin, and I'd just like to ask you to stay with us. Let's go over to Ms. Narasimha Murthy.
We believed in self-reliance.
Ma'am, let me get a Congress response to what you just said. Bhavya, do you want to go ahead, please?
So the Griha Lakshmi Yojana, first of all, this was promised to the state of Karnataka and our voters only because of the previous BJP government and their the corruption field, which had pushed the people of Karnataka to the brink of poverty. When it comes to development, don't you think this improving the standard of living of people comes up the topmost priority? This was the complete intention behind Griha Lakshmi Yojana. Yes, we already knew that there will be budget constraints in this. The Chief Minister Siddaramaiah has presented 13 budgets so far, and and so far he has never violated any of the conditions of FRBM Act. But this time, yes, still we have fulfilled two conditions of this FRBM Act, which was not even respected under the BJP's regime. When it comes to economics, yes, this time, Griha Lakshmi Yojana, I'm not denying this will be a burden on the state's exchequer, but this is like an investment. And like the economic expert here, he said, we should be given a chance to prove ourselves. And BJP has this urgency, in attacking Congress in every way possible. They're so aimless and directionless that without any argument, they place this, and all of a sudden there will be, they'll have this tongue-in-the-cheek movement, whether it was our guarantees, implementation to the budget, where they didn't even have an opposition to even discuss the budget in the assembly, to now starting a discussion of KMF saying we, stopped supplying KMF Nandini ghee to Tirupati, and it happened that for the past 1.5 years, when BJP was in power also, they were not supplying the same, and they had not applied for the tender. So BJP is having this tongue-in-the-cheek movement every time because they're aimlessly and directionlessly attacking Congress without a leader of opposition in the assembly. I think they should first have an agenda. They should first behave responsibly before opposing Congress.
Okay. Ma'am, can I just ask you to stay with us? I want to take one more question over to Professor Chandan Gowda. We'll then come back to both of the political panelists too. Professor, I just want to understand from you, when it comes to the larger conversation around freebies, one of the statements that we had the Congress spokesperson who's with us on the show say is that this is an investment, something you're doing now that will hopefully have dividends later. Tell us, is that how this typically works? These promises have been called freebies. If I were to call them freebies for just a second, are there other examples where freebies have worked in that manner in the long term in other states, for example?
I think it's incorrect to call them freebies because there's something pejorative about it.
Yes.
It's got a bad ring to it.
Correct, yeah.
These are well-known welfare measures in the West. I mean, the unemployment dole has been around for decades. And that is something that the Congress is trying to introduce here. There's a fifth scheme which is not yet taken off because they're still working out the criteria for who should be eligible for it and the amount, etc. So I frankly welcome this. If you think about it, ma'am, the entire budget for the metro, 30,000 crores, is the budget allocated for the 2,000 rupee for a woman-headed household. It's the same. And no one gives a damn about the fact that so much is being spent on metro for one city, whereas the same amount being given to a large number of women across the state is inviting so much, contestation. I feel we need to get a grip on things, and we do realize that the budgets on infrastructure, on large infrastructure, is way more than these things. Somehow, when we think of little support schemes for the deserving, if you think about it, the women need to be below poverty line. Their husbands can't work and pay tax, etc., etc. Two women in the same household can't get it. If you have a four-way, wheeler, you can't get it. I mean, you really have to be someone who's truly hard up to be eligible for these schemes. And I think we should not grudge them these things, considering how much the country spends on things that directly translate into a good life for the middle classes. So I'm not saying the middle classes ought to be deprived, but I'm saying one needs to think of welfare spending for the people below the poverty line. And what we're doing is something we should be pleased about, because truly the government is for everyone. And we know that the poor pay a large amount of taxes, but if you think of how much they get back in return in terms of government schemes, etc., it isn't very much.
Okay.
So I would just ask us to be a little more generous, a little more understanding of these schemes that are meant for the poor, and not see it as only or purely manipulative games of political parties. And I think we need a maturity of this thing, because imagine some other government, some other party came to power in the state tomorrow. It will need to respect something like this and keep it going, and not see it as, that party scheme, so let's discontinue it. So we need a healthy debate on the philosophy of welfareism in the first place, and not simply reduce it to political games, which is what unfortunately it's become.
Okay. Professor Gowda, I do have to end our conversation right now, but I want to thank you for bringing us all of that perspective. Dr. Lakshmi Ashwin, thank you for joining us for this conversation. Bhavya Narasimhamurthy, thank you for joining us. That is all that we have for you here on Plain Speak. We've taken a look at two different issues this evening. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for staying with us over this last hour.